Both of you want to play the hero for some waitress? Walk away, or this gets messy, Officer Dimsdale said, as his hand stayed locked around Leslie's arm. He looked at Harry Barkley and Jason Carlton with the contemptuous ease of a man convinced he was untouchable. Then he turned his back on them like they were nothing, like the uniform, the rank, and their years of classified operations meant nothing inside this diner. Harry and Jason held their ground, steady and unmoving. Years of military discipline kept both men composed. What Dimsdale couldn't possibly know was that the Navy SEALs he just dismissed had dismantled more dangerous operations than this, and had never once walked away from one unfinished. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The sign was hand-painted. Crooked letters on a piece of plywood nailed to a fence post at the edge of the highway ramp. Millie's Diner. Best biscuits in 3 counties. Harry Barkley drove past it without slowing down. No, he said. You didn't even look at it. I looked. Jason Carlton twisted in the passenger seat and watched the sign disappear behind them. He pressed a hand to his chest like a man who'd been wounded. 3 counties, Harry. It says 3 counties. It says somebody painted a sign. A man with conviction painted that sign. Jason settled back and crossed his arms. A man who believed in something. Harry said nothing. He kept both hands on the wheel and his eyes on the road. They had been driving since 4 in the morning. Kings Bay was 12 hours behind them. Home was 3 hours ahead. The only thing he wanted was a shower, a real bed, and 8 hours of silence. The truck slowed down. Jason didn't say a word. He just looked out the windshield with a small, satisfied smile. Harry took the exit ramp. Harlan Falls. Georgia wasn't much to look at from the road. A gas station, a dollar store, a used car lot with plastic flags strung between the light poles. The kind of town that the interstate was built to bypass, and mostly did. But Millie's Diner sat right on Route 9 like it had always been there and always would be. Red vinyl booths in the windows. A hand-lettered chalkboard by the door advertising the Tuesday special. The parking lot had 6 cars in it, before 8 in the morning, which was all the review either man needed. Harry pulled in. The bell above the door announced them when they walked in. Cool air hit them. The good kind of diner cool. The kind that smells like coffee and bacon grease and something that takes you back to somewhere you can't quite name, but know you've been before. The place was about half full. 2 old farmers sat at the counter on chrome stools, bent over their mugs like they'd been there since sunrise and planned to stay until noon. A young couple in a corner booth was coaxing a toddler into eating scrambled eggs. A woman near the window had a paperback open in front of her, a half-eaten piece of pie beside it. The photographs on the far wall covered it almost completely. Faces of regulars going back decades, smiling out at the room like a family reunion that never quite ended. Harry looked at the farmers, the woman with the book, the photographs. Some places just feel like something, he thought. Hard to explain. Easy to feel. They slid into the back booth. She appeared almost immediately. She was young, maybe late 20s, moving through the diner the way someone moves when they know every inch of the place by heart. Not rushed. Not slow. Just sure of herself. Her uniform was clean and pressed. Her hair was pulled back neat. She had a smile that she gave freely, and a way of looking at you that made you feel like you were the only table in the room. Good morning, gentlemen. Her name tag read, Leslie. She set down 2 menus without being asked, and flipped to a fresh page in her order pad. Coffee to start? Please, Jason said. Then he looked at the chalkboard on the wall. Are the biscuits as good as the sign says? She didn't hesitate. Better. Harry looked up. Bold claim. Bold biscuits. She smiled and poured the coffee without spilling a drop. Give me a few minutes, and you'll stop questioning the sign. Jason pointed at Harry. He didn't want to stop. Most people don't. She tucked the coffee pot under her arm and looked at Harry directly. Most people who don't stop are wrong. Harry almost smiled. Almost. 2 orders of biscuits and gravy. Good choice. She took the menus back and headed toward the kitchen with the ease of someone who'd made that walk 10,000 times. Jason lifted his mug. I like her. You like everybody. I like good people. He sipped his coffee and leaned back. She's good people. You can just tell. Harry picked up his own mug. Outside the window, Route 9 rolled past quiet and unhurried. A town going about its Tuesday morning like nothing in the world was wrong. He let himself relax, just a little. They were just passing through. That was all this was. The biscuits were everything the sign promised. Harry was halfway through his second one when the bell above the door rang again. He didn't look up right away. He was reaching for his coffee. Jason was saying something about the gravy. It was a good morning. A quiet one. Then he felt it. He couldn't explain it exactly. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't anything he could point to. It was more like a change in pressure, the way the air in a room shifts when something bad walks into it. His body recognized it before his brain did. 15 years of training had made him that way. He looked up. 2 officers stood just inside the door. The first one was big. Not tall, just wide and solid, like something that had been pressed into its shape by force. Mid-40s. His uniform was tight across the shoulders. His name tag read Dimsdale. He had the kind of face that might have been handsome once, before whatever he was on the inside started showing up on the outside. His eyes moved across the diner slowly, taking inventory, deciding what was his. The second officer was younger, lean. He stood half a step behind Dimsdale and kept his eyes on the floor. His name tag read Ponce. He had the look of a man who had learned a long time ago that it was safer not to see things. Harry watched the room react. The 2 farmers at the counter didn't turn around. They just got very still and very interested in the bottoms of their mugs. The young couple in the corner pulled their toddler a little closer without thinking about it, the way you pull something precious toward you when you sense danger nearby. The woman with the paperback stopped reading, but she didn't look up either. Nobody looked up. That told Harry everything. Dimsdale didn't sit down. He didn't pick up a menu. He walked straight to the counter with the slow, deliberate stride of a man who had never once in his life walked into a room he didn't own. He stopped and looked down the counter until he found what he was looking for. Then he pulled out a stool, sat down, and drummed his knuckles on the counter 3 times. Loud, sharp, like he was knocking on a door he already owned. Hey! He didn't say please. He didn't say, excuse me. He just said it at the kitchen, at nobody in particular, like the word itself was a command. Hey, somebody want to get out here? Leslie came out of the kitchen with a coffee pot in her hand. She saw him. The smile she'd been wearing since Harry and Jason walked in didn't disappear exactly. It just went somewhere far away, behind her eyes, where it couldn't be touched. Officer Dimsdale. Her voice was steady. What can I do for you? Dimsdale leaned back on his stool and looked her up and down slowly. Not fast, not subtle. The kind of look designed to make a person feel small. He let the silence stretch out longer than it needed to, just because he could. Got a complaint filed against you, he said finally. Register came up $40 short last Saturday night. Customer says they watched you pocket it right off the counter. The diner went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet. The held breath kind. Leslie blinked. That's not true. Customer filed a report. What customer? Her brow came together, genuinely confused. Not defensive. Confused. I worked that whole shift. Nobody said a word to me. Nobody complained about anything. Saturday was a normal night. Dimsdale shrugged, like that was beside the point. Well, somebody had something to say about it after the fact. Who? She asked. Who filed this report? He didn't answer that. He just smiled the same flat smile and kept going like she hadn't asked at all. Because here was the truth sitting right there in the open for anyone willing to see it. There was no customer. There was no complaint. There was no incident report with a name and a signature sitting in some filing cabinet down at the station. There was nothing. There had never been anything. Dimsdale had walked into this diner with a story he made up himself, and he was telling it with a straight face, because he had done it before, and nobody had ever made him stop. No? He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. That's real interesting, Leslie, because you were the only one working the counter all night. So either the money walked out on its own, or—" He let that hang there deliberately. Let the whole room hear what he wasn't saying. Manager Cordish appeared from the back office doorway right on cue, like a man who had heard his name called and wasn't sure whether to answer it. He stood there in his manager's apron and looked at the floor and said absolutely nothing. He could have said the register balanced that night. He could have said he pulled the receipts himself come Sunday morning, and every dollar was exactly where it was supposed to be. He knew that. Everyone in this building who worked Saturday night knew that. He said nothing. Not a word in her defense. Not a question. Not a single pushback. He just existed in the middle distance and let it happen. "I didn't touch that register," Leslie said. Dimsdale tilted his head. "You calling me a liar?" "I'm telling you the truth." He stood up off the stool. Slowly. He straightened his belt, adjusted his badge, took his time. Every movement said the same thing. "I am not in a hurry, because you are not a threat to me." He walked around to her side of the counter, into her space, close enough that she had to look up at him. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice dropping low. "You're going to take off that little apron, and you're going to come down to the station with me, and we're going to sort this out. And if you've got nothing to hide, then you've got nothing to worry about." He paused. "Right? I have 4 tables. They'll survive. I'm in the middle of my shift. Take off the apron." Each word landed like something thrown. He shot a glance back at the room, at the farmers, at the couple, at every person in that diner who was currently staring hard at the table in front of them. His expression said, "You see this? Nobody's stopping me. Nobody ever stops me." Then he turned back to Leslie and snatched her by the forearm. His fingers dug in hard, not a grip, a vice, yanking her forward so fast she stumbled into the counter's edge and knocked the coffee pot sideways. It hit the surface with a crack. Brown coffee splashed across the counter and dripped onto the floor. The whole diner flinched. Leslie sucked in a sharp breath through her teeth. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. But her free hand flew to the counter's edge to catch herself, and her eyes, those steady, warm, capable eyes, went wide for just a second, with something that looked a lot like pain. Harry set down his coffee cup. He set it down slowly and deliberately, the way a man sets something down when he has decided he is done sitting still. Jason already had his phone on the table, camera facing forward. His thumb hovered over the screen. Neither of them said a word. Not yet. Harry was already moving. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He pushed back from the booth with the kind of calm that isn't really calm at all. It's something colder, something controlled, the kind a man develops when he has spent years in places where panic gets people killed. Jason didn't follow him. He stayed right where he was, slid his phone to the edge of the table, and pointed the camera at the counter. His thumb hit record without a sound. Harry crossed the diner in 8 steps. He stopped 6 feet from Dimsdale, close enough to be heard, far enough to be seen by every single person in the room. "Officer." His voice was level, unhurried. It cut right through the silence like a blade through still water. "Take your hand off her arm." The whole diner held its breath. Dimsdale turned around slowly. His eyes traveled up Harry's frame. The uniform, the broad shoulders, the rank insignia, and something shifted behind his face. Not fear. Not yet. Just the look of a man doing quick math and deciding he didn't like the numbers. "This is police business," Dimsdale said. "Walk away." "I'm not going to do that." Dimsdale let go of Leslie's arm. Not because he wanted to, because he needed both hands free and a new angle. He squared up to Harry and pulled himself to his full height, which still wasn't enough. "You got a problem, soldier." "Navy." Harry reached into his breast pocket and produced his military ID. He held it out flat so the entire room could read it. "Master Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy SEALs." "And yeah, I've got a problem." Dimsdale looked at the ID. Looked at Harry. Looked at the ID again. "I don't care if you're the president," he said. You don't interfere with the law enforcement. You have no lawful basis to detain this woman." Harry's voice didn't get louder. It got cleaner, sharper, like he was reading from something printed in large, clear letters that everyone in the room could follow along with. No probable cause, no warrant, no witness statement on record, because there is no witness, and there is no report, and you know that better than anybody standing here right now. Dimsdale's jaw tightened. Harry kept going. Under Georgia Code Title 51, Chapter 7, what you just did, grabbing this woman, pulling her physically, making her stumble, that is unlawful restraint. That is battery. And it happened in front of a room full of witnesses. He paused just long enough to let that land. And a camera. Dimsdale's eyes cut sideways to the back booth. Jason gave him a small wave. Phone still recording. For the first time since he walked through that door, something flickered across Dimsdale's face that wasn't confidence. Ponce, still standing by the door, shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He looked at his partner. He looked at the floor. He looked at Harry. He looked like a man who was beginning to understand exactly which side of history he was standing on. "You're making a big mistake," Dimsdale said, low, private, just for Harry. "I've made mistakes before." Harry didn't blink. "This isn't one of them." The silence stretched out. Then Dimsdale smiled. That flat, practiced smile that didn't mean anything good. He straightened his badge, took one long look around the diner, making sure everyone saw him leaving on his own terms, and then pointed a finger at Leslie. "This isn't finished," he said. "I'll be back with documentation. And next time, your little bodyguards won't be here." He turned and walked out. Ponce followed without a word. The bell above the door rang behind them. Nobody moved. Then the farmer at the counter, the older one, the one who had been staring into his coffee mug since the moment Dimsdale walked in, turned around on his stool and started clapping. Slow at first. Then the woman with the paperback joined him. Then the young couple. Then the other farmer. It built into something that filled the whole room and bounced off the photographs on the wall and rose up to the ceiling. Leslie stood at the counter. Her arm was red where Dimsdale's fingers had been. Her coffee pot was still lying on its side in a spreading brown puddle, but her back was straight. Her chin was up. She looked like a woman who had been hit and had not fallen. She turned to Harry. "Thank you," she said quietly. "But it won't stop." Harry looked at her. "Tell me," he said. Cordish disappeared back into his office without a word. Nobody was surprised. Harry slid into the corner booth. Jason stopped recording, pocketed his phone, and moved to join them. Leslie untied her apron, folded it over the back of a chair, and sat down across from them both. She pressed her fingers flat against the tabletop like she needed something solid to hold on to. The diner had gone back to its quiet hum. The farmers returned to their coffee. The woman with the paperback found her page. Everyone was pretending very hard that everything was normal. Leslie looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked up. "His name is Seth," she said. "My little brother. He's 24. She said it the way you say the name of someone you're scared for. Carefully. Like the name itself was something fragile. He does HVAC work, heating and cooling. Has his own clients, good reputation, never been in trouble a day in his life." She paused. 3 months ago, Dimsdale pulled him over on Route 9. Right out front, practically. No broken taillight, no expired tags, no reason at all. Jason leaned forward. "What happened?" "Dimsdale made him get out of the car, searched the whole vehicle, made Seth stand on the side of the road for 45 minutes while he ran his name over and over." Her jaw tightened at the memory. Seth said cars were slowing down to look. People he knew, driving past, watching him stand there on the shoulder like a criminal. She shook her head. Dimsdale found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Didn't write a ticket. Didn't give a reason. Just let him go like it was nothing. But Seth didn't let it go, Harry said. No. She almost smiled at that. He's not built that way. He filed a formal complaint with the sheriff's department, wrote it all out himself, submitted it the right way, through the right channels. Her almost smile faded. 2 weeks later, A woman named Mrs. Patton. She lives on Route 9. She saw the whole stop from her front porch. She got a visit from 2 officers. Plain clothes. They sat outside her house for a while, then knocked and asked her some questions. Leslie's voice stayed even, but her fingers pressed harder into the table. Her statement was never recorded, never made it into the complaint file. The diner felt smaller than it had a minute ago. 3 days after Seth's complaint was officially logged, Leslie said, Dimsdale pulled him over again. She stopped, swallowed. This time, Dimsdale said he found drugs in Seth's trunk, said there was a bag of meth sitting right there in plain sight when he opened it. She looked at Harry directly. Seth has never touched drugs. Not once. Not ever. I would know. I am the only family he has got. And I would know. The words sat on the table between them like something heavy. He's been in county jail for 8 days, she said. His trial starts in 6 days. And yesterday, her voice caught for just a second. Just 1 second. She pulled it back. Yesterday, his public defender called me and said he was withdrawing from the case. Something about a conflict of interest. Wouldn't explain it. Just said he was off the case and Seth would need to find other representation. 6 days before trial, Jason said quietly. 6 days before trial. She nodded. I've been calling lawyers, legal aid, anyone I can find. Nobody's moving fast enough. Nobody's moving at all. She looked down at her folded apron. The charges carry a mandatory minimum of 8 years. 8 years! The number landed like a fist. Leslie was 28 years old. Her brother was 24. 8 years meant he would be 32 before he saw the outside of a cell. 8 years meant his whole life, his work, his clients, everything he had built, would be gone before he got out. And Dimsdale knew that. That was the point. This morning, Leslie said, when Dimsdale walked in here and grabbed my arm in front of all these people, that wasn't about any register. She looked up. Her eyes were clear and steady and burning with something that had been burning for a long time. That was him reminding me that he can do whatever he wants. To me, to Seth, to anybody. And nobody's going to stop him. The table was quiet. Jason looked at Harry. Harry looked at Leslie. Then Jason said, simply, and without any drama at all, we're not leaving. Harry nodded once, slow and certain. Tell me everything about Seth's case, he said. From the beginning. Harry stood up from the booth and walked outside. He needed air. He needed quiet. And he needed to make phone calls that Leslie Welcher did not need to hear him make. Not because they would frighten her, but because some of the favors he was about to call in existed in the space between official and unofficial. And that space was not somewhere civilians needed to visit. The morning sun hit him full in the face when he pushed through the door. Route 9 rolled past slow and easy. A pickup truck, a school bus, a woman walking a dog on the far shoulder. A perfectly ordinary Tuesday in a town that had been hiding something ugly for a very long time. He made 3 calls. The first was to a JAG officer named Billy, who owed him a favor going back 4 years. Harry gave him 2 names, Fabio Dimsdale and the Harlan County Sheriff's Department, and asked him to run everything he could find. Publicly available. Complaint history. Disciplinary records. Civil suits. Anything. The second call was to Agent Reller. He got voicemail. He left a message that was short and specific and said everything it needed to say without saying anything it shouldn't. The third call was to Atlanta. The phone rang twice. Valerie Richards. It's Harry Barkley. A pause. Then, Harry. Her voice shifted, not softer, just more focused. Valerie Richards had 2 speeds, working and sleeping, and she slept very little. How bad? 24-year-old man. Fabricated drug charges. Trial in 6 days. Public defender just withdrew. The officer who made the arrest has a history, and the DA's office is involved. He paused. I need you down here. Another pause. Shorter this time. Where's here? Harlan Falls, Georgia. Route 9. I know where that is. He heard movement on her end. A drawer opening. Keys. I'm getting my bag. That was Valerie. No negotiation. No list of reasons why it was complicated. Just her bag off the hook and her feet moving toward the door because that was who she was and had always been. "I'll text you the address," Harry said. "Don't bother. I'll find the diner." She paused. "There's always a diner." He hung up and stood in the parking lot for a moment longer. Then he went back inside. Jason had not been idle. He had his phone flat on the table and both thumbs moving, pulling up every public record he could find. Court filings, news archives, county commission minutes, the kind of documents that lived in plain sight on government websites that nobody ever thought to look at. He looked at them. Harry slid back into the booth. "Valerie's coming." Leslie looked up. "Who's Valerie?" "The best civil rights attorney in Atlanta." Harry looked at Jason. "What do you have?" Jason turned his phone around and set it on the table between them. "The DA prosecuting Seth's case," he said. "His name is Von Hudson." Harry read the screen. Then he went very still. "Billy called me back while you were outside," Jason said. "Ran the names like you asked." He tapped the phone. "Von Hudson and Fabio Dimsdale are brothers-in-law. Hudson married Dimsdale's sister 23 years ago. They are family." The word landed in the booth like a stone dropped into still water. Leslie stared at the phone. "They're... what?" "Family," Jason said. "And it goes further than that." He scrolled down. "In the last 4 years, 3 people filed formal complaints against Dimsdale. 3 separate incidents. 3 separate people who decided to do the right thing and go through the proper channels." He looked at Leslie. "Sound familiar?" She said nothing. "First one moved out of town 8 months after filing. Second one recanted. Withdrew the complaint completely. No explanation on record." Jason paused. "Third one is currently sitting in the state penitentiary on a conviction prosecuted personally by Von Hudson." The booth was absolutely silent. Harry looked at the table. He was putting it together the way he put everything together. Methodically, completely. Without room for the comfortable lie that this was coincidence. This was not one bad cop having a bad day. This was a system, built carefully, maintained quietly, designed to make sure that anyone who challenged Fabio Dimsdale ended up worse off than before they tried. Leslie had understood this in her bones for months, but hearing it, laid out in plain language, piece by piece, was something different. Something that made her press her hand flat over her mouth for just a moment. Harry turned to her. "Your brother didn't lose this fight," he said. His voice was quiet, but it did not waver. "They just made sure he was fighting it alone." He looked at her steadily. "He's not alone anymore." Valerie Richards arrived at 7:14 in the evening. She drove a dark blue sedan that was dusty from 4 hours on the highway and pulled into the motel parking lot like she owned it. She was 51 years old, sharp-featured, and dressed in a charcoal blazer over a white blouse that somehow still looked pressed after a 4-hour drive. She had a leather briefcase in one hand and a rolling carry-on in the other, and she moved like a woman who had learned long ago that time spent slowly was time wasted. Harry met her in the parking lot. She looked him up and down once. "You look tired. You look like you drove 4 hours." "I did." She handed him the carry-on without breaking stride. "Which room?" By 8 o'clock, the 2 motel rooms had become one war room. The connecting door was propped open. Jason had his laptop open on one bed and 3 legal pads spread across the other. Valerie had commandeered the small desk and covered it with documents she had pulled and printed at a copy shop on Route 9. Seth's arrest report, the complaint filing, Hudson's public case history, everything she could get her hands on in 4 hours of driving and thinking simultaneously. Leslie sat in the corner chair. She had her hands wrapped around a cup of gas station coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She wasn't drinking it. She was just holding it. Valerie read everything twice before she said a single word about any of it. Then she set down the last page, took off her reading glasses, and looked at Leslie directly. "I'm taking your brother's case," she said. "I'm filing an emergency motion tonight to assume his defense. By morning, I will be his attorney of record." She paused. "I need you to tell me everything you know. Not what you think matters. Everything." Leslie told her. Valerie wrote without looking up. Her handwriting was small and fast, and covered the legal pad in straight, dense lines. She asked questions that cut to the exact center of things. No warm-up. No easing in. What time was the second stop? What road? What direction was Seth traveling? Had he been to any location that day that could explain being in that area? Who knew he filed the complaint? How long between the filing and the arrest? Leslie answered every question. Harry and Jason listened and said nothing. This was Valerie's room now. When Leslie finished, Valerie tore the top sheet off the legal pad and pinned it to the wall above the desk with a thumbtack she produced from her blazer pocket, like she had been expecting to need it. "Here is what we are working with," she said. 6 days. No defense attorney on record as of this morning. A compromised DA who is family to the arresting officer. A judge who has spent 30 years in the same county as both of them. She capped her pen. The case against Seth looks airtight on paper. That means our job is to find the paper that isn't there. Jason looked up from his laptop. "I'm already mapping every camera within 2 blocks of the arrest site." "Good." Valerie pointed at Harry. "I need your federal contact, the one you mentioned on the phone. Reller. Get him on standby. I don't know yet what we'll need him for, but I want him warm." She turned back to her desk. "I'm filing the motion in the next hour. Tomorrow morning, first thing, we go see Seth." The jail visit was scheduled for 9 the next morning. Harry had been in difficult rooms before, rooms where everything was wrong and the air itself felt hostile. But there was something about a county jail visiting room, the fluorescent light, the bolted-down furniture, the thick reinforced glass, that put a particular kind of weight on a person. The weight of a system that had already decided what you were. Seth Welcher was brought in wearing a county-issued jumpsuit 2 sizes too big for his frame. He was 24 years old, and he had been inside for 8 days, and it showed. Not in weakness. He walked straight, kept his chin up, but around his eyes there was something that hadn't been there before. Something dim. The look of a man who has started to believe that hoping costs more than it's worth. He sat down across the glass from Harry and Jason. He looked at them both for a long moment. 2 big men in civilian clothes who were strangers to him in every sense. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Harry leaned forward. "Because your sister asked us to," he said. "And because it's right." Seth looked down at his hands. They were folded on the table in front of him. The hands of a man who fixed things for a living, who had built something honest from nothing, who had filed a legitimate complaint through legitimate channels and been destroyed for it. Then he looked back up, and he told them everything. Seth's account was precise. That was the first thing Harry noticed. The kid didn't ramble, didn't exaggerate. He told it the same way a good witness tells it, start to finish, in order, exactly what he saw and heard and felt, without decoration. The second stop, the headlights in his mirror, Dimsdale's voice, Ponce standing back by the cruiser. The exact moment Dimsdale walked to the rear of Seth's car. "He walked around to my trunk," Seth said. "I heard a door open, but it wasn't my trunk." He looked at Harry steadily. "I never opened my trunk. I never touched it. He opened something on his own car first. Then he came back to mine." Jason wrote it down, word for word. They had 2 names from Seth before the visit ended. A retired schoolteacher named Eunice Patton, who lived on Route 9 and had watched the second stop from her front porch, and a young man named Troy Hayes, who had been parked at the Route 9 Gas and Go across the road, waiting for a friend. 2 witnesses. It wasn't much, but it was something. Eunice Patton lived in a pale yellow house with a covered porch and a flower bed that ran the full length of the front yard. She answered the door before Harry could knock a second time, which told him she had seen them coming up the walk and had been deciding whether to open it. She was 68 years old, small and neat, with reading glasses pushed up on top of her head, and the careful eyes of a woman who had lived in Harlan Falls long enough to know exactly how things worked here. She looked at Harry, then at Jason, then past them both at the street. "Come inside," she said quietly. "Don't stand on the porch." She had sweet tea ready, which meant she had been expecting someone eventually. She sat across from them in a floral armchair and folded her hands in her lap and listened while Harry explained who they were and why they were there. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I saw it," she said finally. "The whole thing. I was sitting right out there." She tilted her head toward the front porch. "I saw that officer walk to the back of his own car before he ever touched that boy's trunk." Her jaw tightened. "I knew what I saw. Would you be willing to testify to that?" Harry asked. She looked at her hands. The silence stretched long enough to tell its own story. "I've lived here my whole life," she said. "My daughter lives 4 streets over. My grandchildren go to school in this county." She looked up. "I know what happens to people who make trouble for Fabio Dimsdale. Mrs. Patton." Harry leaned forward. "Seth Welcher is 24 years old. He filed a legitimate complaint and he's sitting in a cell for it. You may be the only person who can—" "I know that." Her voice came out sharper than she intended. She softened it. "I know that, young man. I've been knowing that for 8 days, and it has not let me sleep." She looked out the window toward Route 9. "Let me think on it. Come back tomorrow." It wasn't yes, but it wasn't no. Troy Hayes was 22 and lived in a studio apartment above a laundromat on the south end of town. He cracked the door open 4 inches and looked out at them through the gap like a man who had learned to be cautious about who he let in. Jason explained the situation in plain, direct terms. No pressure, just the facts. Troy shook his head. "I can't get involved in anything right now." "Why not?" Jason asked. Troy looked at the floor. "I got a warrant, traffic stuff, nothing serious. But if I start making noise, they'll use it." Jason looked at Harry. Harry gave him a small nod. "Give me until tomorrow morning," Jason said. "I'll have that warrant resolved through proper channels. Legally. Cleanly. It'll be handled." Troy looked at him for a long time. "You can do that?" "Yes." Another long look. Then Troy opened the door a little wider. "Okay," he said. "Tomorrow morning. If it's handled, I'll sign a statement." By the following morning, Jason had the warrant resolved. It took 12 hours, 1 favor, and a phone call to a clerk in the county magistrate's office. It was done quietly and completely correctly, and it cost Jason something he would not mention to anyone. He knocked on Troy's door at 8:30. Troy opened it. He looked at Jason. "It's gone?" "It's gone." Troy nodded slowly. He picked up a pen off his kitchen counter. He signed the statement. Then Dimsdale moved. Eunice Patton called Harry at noon. Her voice was shaking in a way it hadn't been the day before. "There's a patrol car sitting in front of my house," she said. "Been there 40 minutes. Nobody's gotten out. Nobody's knocked." She paused. "They're just sitting there." Harry closed his eyes for 1 second. "Don't go outside," he said. "I'll call you back." He called her back 2 hours later. She didn't answer. At 4 in the afternoon, Valerie's phone rang. It was Eunice Patton. She was sorry, she said. She had thought about it more carefully. She wasn't sure what she saw had been as clear as she first thought. Her eyes weren't what they used to be. She didn't want to say something under oath that she couldn't be 100% certain of. She was sorry. Valerie wrote it down without expression. She thanked Mrs. Patton and ended the call and sat quietly for a moment with her pen in her hand. Troy's phone went straight to voicemail that evening. His apartment, when Jason drove past, was dark. A neighbor said he had packed a bag and gone to stay with family. She didn't know where. Harry stood in the parking lot of the motel with his arms crossed and looked at the sky. Dimsdale was watching. Dimsdale had always been watching. And tomorrow, Seth's trial was 4 days closer. Jason didn't sleep that night. Harry came out of the bathroom at 2 in the morning and found him exactly where he had been at midnight, sitting on the edge of the bed, laptop open, 3 empty coffee cups lined up on the nightstand like a timeline of how long he had been at it. "Go to sleep," Harry said. "In a minute." Harry looked at the screen. Lines of data. File logs. Timestamps. "What are you looking at?" "Dimsdale's body camera footage from the night of Seth's arrest." Jason didn't look up. Or rather, "I'm looking at where it isn't." Harry sat down on the other bed. The official story was simple. Dimsdale's body camera had malfunctioned during the stop. The file was corrupted. Nothing was recoverable. It was documented in the incident report in 2 clean bureaucratic sentences that were designed to be read quickly and forgotten. Jason was not built for reading things quickly and forgetting them. The department uses a cloud backup system, he said. Every body camera in the Harlan County Sheriff's Department automatically uploads footage to a remote server within 90 minutes of an officer's shift ending. He turned the laptop so Harry could see the screen. This is the manifest log. It's a public record. Valerie filed a FOIA request 2 days ago, and it came back this afternoon. Harry looked at the log. There, Jason pointed. That is a file uploaded from Dimsdale's camera on the night of Seth's arrest. Uploaded at 11:47 p.m., right on schedule. He scrolled down. And that, he pointed again, that is the same file being deleted. 3 days later. Harry looked at the date on the deletion entry. 3 days after the arrest. 2 days after Seth's complaint was officially logged with the department. The room was very quiet. So the footage existed, Harry said. The footage existed, Jason confirmed. It uploaded automatically like it was supposed to. And then somebody went in and deleted it. He closed the laptop. That is not a malfunction. That is a choice. They brought it to Valerie at 7 in the morning. She read the manifest log twice, holding it close like she was checking for something hidden between the lines. Then she set it flat on the desk and put both palms on it and stood there for a moment with her eyes closed. This is enough for emotion, she said. Potentially tampering with evidence. Federal preservation rules apply to body camera footage in an active criminal case. If that file existed and was deliberately deleted after charges were filed, she opened her eyes. They had a legal obligation to preserve it. She filed the emergency motion by 9 a.m. The hearing was set for that afternoon. Harlan County Courthouse was a squat brick building that smelled like old carpet and copy paper. Judge Clinton Marshley was a big man gone soft with age, with white hair and reading glasses on a chain around his neck, and the unhurried manner of someone who had been the most powerful person in every room he had entered for 30 years. He did not look pleased to see Valerie Richards. She presented the motion with the precision of a surgeon. The manifest log, the upload timestamp, the deletion date, the federal preservation statute, the direct correlation between the deletion and the filing of Seth's complaint. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The facts raised themselves. Judge Marshley looked at the documents over the top of his glasses. He looked at Valerie. He looked at D.A. Hudson, who sat at the prosecution table with his hands folded and his expression arranged into something that resembled patience. Your Honor, Valerie said, we are requesting immediate production of the original server backup and a preservation order on all remaining data. Judge Marshley was quiet for a long moment. Then he granted the motion. Barely. With the speed of a man doing something he had been told he had no legal choice but to do. From the gallery, Harry watched Hudson's face as the judge ruled. Hudson didn't flinch. He didn't tighten his jaw or shift in his seat. He just nodded slightly, like a man who had already anticipated this move and had already prepared the next one. That bothered Harry more than anger would have. Anger meant you were surprised. Hudson wasn't surprised. Hudson was ready. Walking out of the courthouse, Jason fell into step beside Harry and said quietly, We cracked it open. Harry looked straight ahead. Maybe, he said. He kept walking. The USB drive arrived the following morning. A sheriff's deputy dropped it off at the courthouse clerk's office at 9:45 a.m. in a standard evidence envelope with a chain of custody form attached. Valerie signed for it personally. She held it in her palm for a moment. A small plastic rectangle that was supposed to contain the truth about what happened on Route 9 the night Seth Welcher's life got taken apart. And then she put it in her briefcase and walked to the motel without saying a word. Her tech consultant was already waiting. His name was Philip. He was 30 years old, wore a faded university sweatshirt, and had the kind of quiet competence that didn't need to announce itself. Valerie had used him on 4 previous cases. He set up his equipment on the motel room desk without being asked and held out his hand for the drive without ceremony. Harry, Jason, and Leslie stood back and watched. Philip inserted the drive. His fingers moved across the keyboard. The room was silent except for the low hum of the laptop fan and the distant sound of a truck on Route 9. Then footage appeared on the screen. A dashboard view. Night. The familiar stretch of Route 9 caught in the white beam of patrol car headlights. The timestamp in the corner read the date of Seth's arrest. The audio was clear. Road noise, the crackle of a police radio, Dimsdale's breathing. Seth's car came into frame, pulled over. Hazard lights blinking orange in the dark. They watched Seth get out of the car, watched him put his hands up without being asked. The practiced, instinctive movement of a young black man who had been taught from childhood exactly how to survive a traffic stop. Watched him comply with every instruction. Step back. Turn around. Hands behind his head. He did everything right. Every single thing. Leslie made a small sound beside Harry. Not quite a word. He didn't look at her, but he moved half a step closer. And then the footage stopped. Not gradually. Not with static or distortion. Just stopped. A clean cut. Like a page torn from a book. One frame Dimsdale was walking toward the rear of Seth's vehicle, and the next frame he was back at the driver's window, and the timestamp had jumped forward by exactly 4 minutes and 11 seconds. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Gone. According to Dimsdale's written report, those were the exact 4 minutes and 11 seconds during which he approached the rear of the vehicle, opened the trunk, and discovered the bag of methamphetamine sitting in plain sight. The most important 4 minutes of the entire case. Vanished. Philip leaned back in his chair. This wasn't corrupted, he said. He said it the way a doctor says something definitive, not dramatically, just clearly. A corrupted file degrades. The audio breaks up, the image pixelates, the timestamp stutters. This is a clean cut. Someone went into this file and removed that section deliberately. Jason stood up straighter. Valerie turned to look at Harry. Harry looked at the screen. At the timestamp frozen after the jump. At the 4 missing minutes sitting in the middle of the footage, like a hole punched through the center of a piece of paper. That's tampering, Jason said. That is tampering, Valerie confirmed. Her voice was controlled, but something moved behind her eyes. Something sharp and certain. She turned to Philip. How fast can you document that technically? In language a judge can understand? 2 hours. You have one. She was already reaching for her legal pad. I'm filing a motion to dismiss. Evidence tampering. The chain of custody on these charges runs directly through footage that has been deliberately altered. She wrote as she talked. This isn't just cause for dismissal. This is a federal crime. She looked up. For just a moment, one brief, unguarded moment, the room felt different, lighter, like something that had been pressing down on all of them since the day they walked into this fight had lifted slightly. Leslie pressed both hands over her mouth. Jason exhaled slowly through his nose and looked at the ceiling. Harry looked at the screen. At the clean, deliberate cut in the middle of the footage. They had them. The evidence was right there. Documented, technical, undeniable. Dimsdale had stood in that courtroom and submitted footage he had personally edited. That was not a mistake. That was not a malfunction. That was a man so certain of his own protection that he had committed a federal crime on a court-ordered evidence submission and handed it over with his name on the envelope. Harry should have felt relieved. He didn't. He stood at the edge of the room and watched Valerie write, and felt the thing he always felt when a situation resolved itself too cleanly, too fast, too conveniently. The same quiet warning he had felt every time, in every operation, right before the ground shifted beneath his feet. He kept it to himself, for now. The motion was heard the next morning. Valerie had been up until 2 a.m. preparing it. Every argument clean and precise. The technical documentation from Philip. The timestamp analysis. The chain of custody. She had built it the way she built everything. Carefully, completely, with no gaps and no assumptions. She walked into that courthouse looking like a woman who had already won. Judge Marshley called the hearing to order at 9 a.m. sharp. Valerie presented the motion in 14 minutes. She laid out every piece of evidence in plain, logical order. The cloud backup log showing the original upload. Phillips' technical analysis confirming deliberate editing rather than corruption. The 4-minute and 11-second gap landing exactly where Dimsdale's report claimed the drugs were found. She connected every dot clearly and without drama, because the facts didn't need drama. They needed to be heard. When she finished, Judge Marshley looked at D.A. Hudson over the top of his glasses. Hudson stood up slowly. He buttoned his jacket. He smoothed the front of it. He picked up a single manila folder from the table in front of him, opened it, and removed a small stack of documents with the unhurried ease of a man who had been waiting for this exact moment since before the hearing was even scheduled. "Your Honor," he said pleasantly, "I appreciate Ms. Richards' thorough presentation. I'd like to offer some context." He submitted the documents to the clerk. Copies were handed to Valerie. She looked at the top page. Harry watched her face from the gallery. He watched something change in it. Not collapse, not break, but tighten. The way a face tightens when it absorbs something unexpected and refuses to show how much it hurts. Hudson explained it with the calm patience of a professor, correcting a student's honest mistake. The 4-minute gap in Dimsdale's body camera footage, he said, was entirely consistent with a documented firmware malfunction affecting that specific model of department-issue body camera. A glitch that caused intermittent recording gaps during high CPU operations, such as night vision activation, combined with simultaneous audio processing. The department had identified the issue 6 weeks before Seth's arrest and submitted a formal memo to the manufacturer. He had the memo. He had the manufacturer's acknowledgement letter. He had documentation of 3 prior incidents, other officers, other stops, same gap pattern, from the 2 months preceding the arrest. He submitted all of it, every piece of it real, every piece of it official, every piece of it prepared and waiting like a trap that had been set before anyone even knew they were walking into the woods. Valerie objected, twice, precisely. She argued that documented prior glitches did not explain metadata inconsistencies in the specific file submitted. She argued that the deletion from the cloud backup remained unaddressed. She argued that the correlation between the deletion date and the complaint filing date was not coincidental. Judge Marshley listened to all of it. Then he ruled. The gap was consistent with a documented technical fault. There was insufficient evidence that the submitted file had been manually altered. The production order had been satisfied. The motion to dismiss was denied. Seth's trial would begin as scheduled. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. The courthouse hallway was empty when they walked out. Valerie stopped walking about 20 feet from the exit doors. She turned toward the wall. She put the fingertips of one hand flat against the paint and stood there with her head slightly bowed and breathed. In, out, in. Harry and Jason stood back and gave her that. After a moment, she straightened, turned around, and put her reading glasses back in her pocket. Her face was composed. Her voice was steady. "He had it ready," she said. "That memo, those prior incidents, he had all of it prepared before we ever filed." She looked at Harry. "They knew we would find the gap. They built the explanation before we built the argument." Nobody said anything. Then Valerie's phone buzzed. She looked at it. Something crossed her face. "Seth was in an altercation in the jail last night," she said quietly. "His case manager just sent word. Says it was minor. Says he's fine." She paused. "He is not fine." Dimsdale's reach went inside the walls, too. Harry looked at Jason. Jason looked at the floor. Leslie had been standing 2 steps behind them the whole time. She was 28 years old, and she had not eaten since yesterday morning, and she had just watched the best attorney she had ever seen get the floor pulled out from under her in open court. She looked at the exit doors. Then she looked at Harry. "They're going to take him from me," she said. Quiet, not a question. Just a woman standing at the edge of something terrible, looking down. Harry looked at her. Then at Jason. Jason shook his head slowly. "No, they're not." Harry took out his phone. He walked to the far end of the hallway. He found the number he had not used in 3 years. A number he had kept for a moment exactly like this one, hoping he would never need it. He pressed call. "Reller," he said, "I need you to look at a metadata file. Tonight." Nobody slept. Valerie sat at the desk with her reading glasses on and worked through every document in the case file for the 5th time, looking for anything she might have missed. Leslie sat in the cornered chair with her knees pulled up and her phone in her hand, checking it every few minutes like Seth might somehow call from inside a county jail at midnight. Jason had his laptop open and his headphones around his neck and was doing what he did best, pulling footage, cross-referencing timestamps, following threads that most people wouldn't have thought to pull. Harry sat on the edge of the bed and waited. He was good at waiting. It was one of the things the Navy had built into him so deep it had become part of his structure. You did your preparation, you put your people in position, and then you waited with your whole body alert and your face completely still until the moment came. The moment always came. His phone rang at 2:14 a.m. He was outside in the parking lot before the second ring finished. Reller. Yeah. Agent Reller had a voice like gravel on a tin roof, low, flat, carrying no more weight than it needed to. I looked at your file. And? A pause. Not hesitation. The pause of a man choosing his words with the precision of someone who understood that words, once spoken, became part of the record. The file submitted to the court and the file that was originally uploaded to that cloud server are not the same file, Reller said. The backup log contains a cryptographic hash, basically a digital fingerprint, of every file at the moment it's uploaded. That hash is permanent. It doesn't change. Another pause. The hash of the original upload does not match the hash of the file on that USB drive. Harry stood very still in the dark parking lot. They are not the same file, Reller repeated. Somebody took the original, edited it, and submitted the edited version to the court. The original fingerprint proves it. Can you document that? Already did. I'm sending it now. Harry heard keys clicking. But that's not all. Harry waited. The metadata embedded in the submitted file, the edited one, contains a device identifier. Every time a file is opened and saved on a computer, that machine leaves a fingerprint in the metadata, an ID number registered to the specific device. Reller paused. I ran that ID against the Harlan County Sheriff's Department Equipment Registry. The parking lot was completely silent. Not even wind. It's registered to a department-issued laptop, Reller said. Assigned to Officer Fabio Dimsdale. He let that sit for exactly 1 second. The edit was made 3 days after the arrest. 2 days after the formal complaint was logged. Harry closed his eyes. Not from relief. From the particular feeling of a weapon clicking into place. The cold, precise satisfaction of a thing that cannot be argued with, cannot be explained away, cannot be buried under a firmware memo prepared in advance by a careful and corrupt DA. This is federal, Harry said. Evidence tampering submitted to a court of law, Reller said. On his own machine. With his own credentials. Yeah, this is federal. Another pause. I also want you to know that I did this by the book, Harry. Every step, this holds. I know it does. Harry looked at the motel room window. The light was still on. Send everything to this number. He went back inside. Valerie read Reller's analysis standing up. She didn't sit down. She held the printed pages Harry had run to the 24-hour copy shop on Route 9 to produce, and she read them once completely, and then went back to the beginning and read them again. Then she set the pages on the desk and put both palms flat on top of them. The hash mismatch proves the file was altered, she said. The device ID proves who altered it. The timestamp proves when. She looked up. Hudson's firmware memo explains a gap in footage. It does not explain why the file submitted to this court has a different cryptographic fingerprint than the file originally uploaded to the department's own server. She picked up her pen. No firmware glitch changes a hash. No firmware glitch leaves a device ID in the metadata. No firmware glitch edits 4 minutes out of a file on a specific officer's personal laptop 2 days after a complaint is filed. Leslie was standing in the doorway between the two rooms. She had heard all of it. So it's real, she said. It's actually real. It's real, Valerie said. "And it's federal." She was already writing. "We're not going back to Judge Marshley." She looked at the clock on the wall. 2:41 a.m. "I need one more thing," she said. She looked at Jason. "Tell me what you found on that real estate camera." Jason turned his laptop around. "Been sitting on this for 6 hours," he said. "Wanted to make sure before I said anything." The screen showed a paused video feed. Grainy. Night shot. The image had the washed-out, slightly smeared quality of cheap security footage pushed past what it was built to capture. At the top right corner of the frame was the logo of Harlan County Realty. At the bottom left corner was a sliver of Route 9. Just the edge, just enough, like the road had leaned into the shot without meaning to. "The camera is mounted on the eave of the real estate office," Jason said. "Faces the parking lot, but the angle clips Route 9 about 180 feet down the road." He tapped the bottom left corner of the screen. "Right there. That strip of road. That's where Seth was pulled over." Valerie leaned in close. "I spent 6 hours on this footage," Jason continued, "enhancing it, stabilizing it, matching the timestamps against Dimsdale's official incident report." He looked at Harry. "And I found something." He hit play. The footage was dark and difficult. The real estate parking lot sat empty and still in the foreground, lit by a single overhead lamp. Route 9 in the bottom corner was barely visible, a thin strip of pale road surface caught between the camera's edge and the darkness beyond it. Then a vehicle pulled into frame on Route 9. A patrol car. It moved slowly and pulled to the shoulder and stopped. Its lights stayed on. Jason paused the footage, pointed to the timestamp. "This is 11 minutes before Seth's car appears in the frame," he said. 11 minutes before the stop officially began. He hit play again. A figure got out of the driver's side of the patrol car. The image was grainy and distant, and the night swallowed most of the details. But the uniform was visible. The build was visible. And the movement, deliberate, purposeful, unhurried, was visible. The figure walked to the rear of the patrol car, opened it, reached inside, removed something. The object was small, and the image was too degraded to identify it with certainty. But the action was clear. The figure held something, looked at it briefly, and then closed the rear of the vehicle. Then the figure walked back to the driver's side and got in. Jason paused it again. The room was absolutely silent. 11 minutes later, Jason said quietly, "Seth Welcher's car appears on that road." The stop begins. And 4 minutes and 11 seconds of body camera footage, the exact 4 minutes during which Dimsdale claims he found drugs in Seth's trunk, disappears. He closed the laptop slowly. Dimsdale was on that shoulder before Seth ever drove past. He retrieved something from his own vehicle before the stop began, and then he made sure nobody would ever see what happened next. Valerie straightened up. She was not a woman given to visible emotion in working moments, but something moved across her face. Something quiet and fierce and absolute. "He came prepared," she said. "He came prepared," Jason confirmed. Leslie had both arms wrapped around herself in the doorway. She was looking at the closed laptop like it contained something she had always known was true, but had never been able to prove. Like the ground under 6 months of fear and exhaustion had finally revealed what it was made of. "Can you authenticate it?" Valerie asked. "Chain of custody, timestamps, everything a federal court needs." "Already started," Jason said. "I pulled the original unedited footage directly from the real estate office's backup server this afternoon. The owner let me copy it when I explained the situation. I have the original file, the device it came from, and a signed statement from the owner confirming it hasn't been touched." He looked at Valerie. "I also have a digital forensics contact at Kings Bay who can certify the timestamp integrity by morning." Valerie nodded once, the nod of someone moving immediately to the next step. She picked up her pen and her legal pad, and she began to write with the focused energy of a woman who had just been handed everything she needed and intended to use every single piece of it. "We have 2 things," she said as she wrote. "Reller gives us proof that Dimsdale edited the body camera footage on his own laptop and submitted the altered file to a federal court proceeding." She kept writing without looking up. This footage gives us proof that Dimsdale was positioned at the stop site 11 minutes early and retrieved an object from his own vehicle before Seth arrived. She stopped writing, looked up. Neither one of these things is a theory, she said. Neither one requires a jury to believe a witness who can be intimidated or a neighbor who can be frightened into silence. She held up the legal pad. This is metadata. This is timestamps. This is digital evidence that does not get scared, does not move away, and does not change its story at midnight because a patrol car sat outside its house for 45 minutes. She stood up from the desk. We're bypassing Marshley entirely, she said. This goes to federal court. Tonight. She looked at the clock. 3:17 a.m. I need coffee. A lot of it. And I need everyone in this room to stay awake for the next 6 hours. Jason was already reaching for his phone. Harry looked at Leslie. She had uncrossed her arms. She was standing straighter than she had stood in days. Her chin was up, and her eyes were clear, and she looked like a woman who had just felt the tide turn beneath her feet and recognized it for exactly what it was. 6 hours until Seth's trial was supposed to begin. They got to work. Valerie filed the federal motion at 3:52 a.m. She sent it to the Northern District of Georgia with a cover letter that was 3 pages long and read like a controlled detonation. Measured, precise, and impossible to ignore. It contained Reller's metadata analysis, the cryptographic hash comparison, the device ID registered to Dimsdale's department laptop, the timestamp of the edit, and Jason's authenticated footage from the real estate camera with the forensic certification attached. She cited 4 federal statutes and 1 Supreme Court precedent. Then she sat back in her chair, took off her reading glasses, and drank the last of her cold coffee. Now we wait, she said. Nobody slept. They just waited in their own ways. Jason organized files. Leslie sat by the window and watched Route 9 go gray and then pink as the sun came up behind the tree line. Harry stood outside in the parking lot for a long time with his arms crossed, watching the sky change color, running the operation in his head from beginning to end the way he always did before the final phase, looking for the thing he might have missed, the angle he hadn't covered, the gap in the plan that could still cost them everything. He didn't find one. He went back inside. At 8:47 a.m., a sheriff's transport van pulled out of the Harlan County Detention Center on Mill Road and turned south toward the courthouse. Seth Welcher was in the back of it. He had been up since 6. He had eaten the breakfast they gave him without tasting it. He was wearing the civilian clothes Leslie had dropped off 2 days ago, a pressed blue shirt, dark slacks, the clothes of a man trying to look like what he was, which was innocent. He sat with his hands folded between his knees and looked at the floor of the van and tried to hold on to the thing Harry had told him through the jail glass 6 days ago. He's not alone anymore. He held on to it as hard as he could. At 8:53 a.m., Valerie's phone rang. She looked at the screen, closed her eyes for 1 second, opened them. Yes, she said. She listened. Her face gave nothing away. Yes, understood. Thank you, Your Honor. She ended the call. She looked at Harry. A federal judge in Atlanta just issued an emergency stay of trial, she said. Effective immediately. Seth's case is frozen pending a federal review of the evidence-tampering allegations. She paused. The stay order is being transmitted to the Harlan County Courthouse Clerk's office, right now. Leslie made a sound that was not quite a word. Harry nodded once, slowly. Let's go, he said. The courthouse parking lot was quiet when they arrived at 8:58 a.m. A few cars, a news van from a Savannah TV station that had picked up the federal filing from the court's public docket overnight. Someone at the station had been paying attention. 2 court clerks smoking by the side entrance. An ordinary Tuesday morning in Harlan Falls, Georgia. Except that standing beside his patrol car near the far end of the lot, watching the transport van pull in, was Officer Fabio Dimsdale. He was in full uniform, badge polished, arms crossed. He had the look of a man attending a ceremony he had organized himself. Comfortable, certain, completely in control of how this morning was going to go. He watched the transport van park. He watched the side door open. He didn't notice the 2 men in dark suits walking across the parking lot toward him until they were 15 feet away. They had their credentials out before he could speak. Harry watched it happen from 30 yards away. He watched Dimsdale look at the badges, watched him read them, watched something move across his face that Harry had never seen there before, in all the days since this began. Something that started at the eyes and traveled down and changed the whole shape of the man's expression from the inside out. He knew. He knew before they said a word. The senior agent spoke. His voice didn't carry across the parking lot, but his posture said everything. Dimsdale's chin dropped slightly. His arms came uncrossed. His hands moved to his sides. Then the agent produced a document and Dimsdale looked at it, and whatever was left of his certainty left his body all at once, visibly, like air going out of something. He was placed under arrest at 9:04 a.m. Federal charges, evidence tampering, civil rights violations under color of law, filing false police reports, obstruction of justice. The transport van sat 20 feet away, with its engine still running. Inside it, a 24-year-old man in a pressed blue shirt had no idea that the person who had destroyed his life was standing in handcuffs in the parking lot outside. Ponce was in the lobby when he saw it through the glass doors. He stood completely still for 5 full seconds. Then he walked to the nearest bench and sat down heavily and put his head in both hands. A courthouse security guard looked at him. "You okay?" Ponce looked up. His face had the wrecked, pale look of a man who had just watched something he had been pretending wasn't coming arrive right on schedule. "I need a lawyer," he said. Then, 30 seconds later, in a voice barely above a whisper, "And I want to make a statement." Ponce's lawyer arrived at 10:15. She was a public defender named Castillo, young, fast, clearly competent, and she spent 40 minutes in a private room with Ponce before she came out and told the federal agents that her client was prepared to cooperate fully in exchange for consideration on the lesser charges. The senior agent, whose name was Dmitri, listened to her terms without expression, and then made a call to the U.S. Attorney's office that lasted 11 minutes. Then he came back and said, "We're ready, when he is." Ponce talked for 4 hours. Harry and Jason didn't hear it in real time. Nobody did except the agents, the attorneys, and a federal court reporter whose fingers never stopped moving. What they learned came in pieces, through Valerie, who had contacts inside the federal building in Atlanta, who knew how to say a great deal while technically saying very little. But the shape of it became clear quickly. Ponce had been Dimsdale's partner for 2 years and 6 months. In that time he had watched things he should have stopped, and said nothing about things he should have reported, and convinced himself, in the particular way that weak people convince themselves of terrible things, that staying quiet was just survival and not complicity. He was wrong. He had known he was wrong for a long time. He named 6 cases, 6 separate incidents over 3 years in which Dimsdale had used his badge as a weapon against people who had challenged him, inconvenienced him, or simply existed in his path on the wrong day. Traffic stops that were never about traffic. Searches that were never about evidence. Charges that were never about the law. He named the dates. He named the locations. He described conversations, specific words, specific phrases, that passed between Dimsdale and D.A. Von Hudson before formal charges were ever filed in those cases. Informal calls. Texts. A standing lunch at a steakhouse on the county line every other Thursday, where the 2 men discussed, over their meals, which cases needed to move fast, and which complaints needed to disappear, and which witnesses had suddenly become uncertain about what they saw. Hudson didn't just prosecute the cases Dimsdale brought him. He shaped them. He prepared for challenges before they were filed. He built contingencies, like the firmware memo, into cases before defense attorneys even knew which way the wind was blowing. He had been doing it for years with the smooth, practiced ease of a man who had never once been asked to explain himself and had stopped expecting that he ever would be. Ponce knew about the body camera edit, not the technical details. He wasn't that kind of careful, but he knew. He had been in the patrol car when Dimsdale spent 40 minutes on his laptop the night after the arrest. He had asked what Dimsdale was doing. Dimsdale had told him to mind his own business in language that was clear about what the consequences of not minding it would be. Ponce had minded his own business. He said that into the record, with his head down and his voice flat, and the particular exhausted honesty of a man who had run out of places to hide from himself. Von Hudson resigned at 12:17 p.m. His assistant released a 2-paragraph statement to the local press citing personal health concerns and a desire to spend more time with his family. It was the kind of statement that said nothing, and everyone understood perfectly. The State Bar Association opened a formal investigation before the afternoon was out. 3 of Hudson's past convictions, cases where Dimsdale had been the arresting officer, were immediately flagged for review by the State Attorney General's office. Judge Clinton Marshley filed a recusal notice from every pending case involving the Harlan County Sheriff's Department at 1 p.m. His clerk released it without comment. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation arrived in Harlan Falls at 2 o'clock. 2 unmarked vehicles, 4 agents. They went directly to the Sheriff's Department and asked for the records room. By 3 p.m., the Department of Justice had opened a preliminary inquiry into the Harlan County Sheriff's Department for pattern and practice civil rights violations. The inquiry had been triggered by Valerie's federal filing, which had not limited itself to Seth's case alone. It had named all 3 prior complainants, all 3 outcomes, and drawn a clear, documented line between every single one of them and the man who was currently sitting in federal custody with his badge in an evidence bag. Harry stood outside the courthouse and watched the GBI vehicles in the parking lot. Jason stood beside him. 3 years, Jason said quietly. He did this for 3 years. Longer, Harry said. We only found 3 years. The afternoon sun was warm on the courthouse steps. Route 9 ran past steady and unhurried, the same road it had always been, carrying the same ordinary traffic it always carried. Except that today, for the first time in a very long time, something in this town had shifted. Something that didn't shift back. The dismissal order came at 2:31 p.m. A federal public affairs officer read it aloud in the courthouse hallway. A narrow corridor with fluorescent lights and scuffed linoleum floors that had seen a lot of things go wrong over the years and had never once cared. He read it in a flat, official voice that gave no particular weight to any individual word. Because official voices never do. But every word landed anyway. Charges dismissed with prejudice. With prejudice. That meant permanent. That meant final. That meant Fabio Dimsdale could rot in federal custody for the rest of his natural life, and nobody, not another DA, not another judge, not another corrupt machine in another county, could ever pick these charges back up and use them against Seth Welcher again. Done. Finished. Gone. The public affairs officer folded the order, tucked it under his arm, and walked back down the hallway the way he had come. His shoes squeaked on the linoleum. Nobody moved for a moment. Then Valerie Richards exhaled, long and slow and complete, and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose and stood very still with her eyes closed. It lasted 3 seconds. That was all she gave herself. Then she opened her eyes, straightened her blazer, and turned to face the room. Harry was looking at the door at the end of the hallway, the one that led to the side entrance, the one they said Seth would come through. It took 11 minutes. 11 minutes of the 4 of them standing in that hallway, Harry, Jason, Valerie, and Leslie, not talking much, not needing to. Jason checked his phone. Valerie reviewed something in her briefcase. Harry stood with his arms at his sides and watched the door. Leslie watched the door too. She had her hands clasped in front of her and her back straight and her chin level. She was 28 years old, and she had worked double shifts and eaten vending machine dinners and made phone calls that rang out to voicemail and stood in her own workplace while a man grabbed her arm and a room full of people looked at the floor. She had sat in courtrooms and motel rooms and a county jail visiting room. She had not broken. Not once. Not even close. The door opened. A corrections officer came through first. Then Seth. He was still in his civilian clothes. The pressed blue shirt, the dark slacks, the clothes of an innocent man who had spent 9 days being treated like he was something else. He came through the door blinking slightly, the way people blink when they step from one kind of air into another. He looked at the hallway, at the fluorescent lights, at Valerie, at Jason. Then he found his sister. Leslie didn't run. She walked, steady and purposeful, the way she did everything. The way she carried plates and refilled coffee, and stood her ground in a diner and refused to be made small. She crossed the hallway in 8 steps, and when she reached him, she put both hands on either side of his face and held it. She looked at him for a long moment. His face, his eyes, the bruise along his jaw that was yellowing now at the edges. All of him. Seth's chin trembled once. He pressed his lips together hard and held it. The hallway was quiet. What passed between them in that moment was not something the narrative attempted to capture. Some things belong only to the people inside them. 9 days. A fabricated charge. 8 years hanging over a 24-year-old man's head like a blade on a string. The particular terror of a system turning against you, and the particular relief of discovering it could still be stopped. That lived between Leslie and Seth and nowhere else. After a moment, she pulled him close, and he dropped his head and let her hold him the way younger siblings let older ones hold them when there is nobody watching and the pretending is finally over. Harry turned away, gave them that. Jason looked at the ceiling for a moment, with his jaw set and his eyes bright, and his expression arranged into something that was not going to be called what it was. Valerie closed her briefcase with a soft click. After a moment, Jason said quietly, "Not to anyone in particular, just to the air. You know, I really just wanted the biscuits." Harry stood with his back to the room and his arms crossed. Something happened at the corners of his mouth. Not a smile, exactly. Something better. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.